Thank you, Eamon, very much for introducing me, and I appreciate that. And Eamon and I have built an incredible relationship over the years, and I'm really excited to continue our journey at Bettany and to see what this restaurant is going to achieve. I think that the people we have are some of the most passionate and talented cooks and dining room staff, professionals that I've ever worked with, and I know that right now the restaurant's the best it's ever been, and I know that we're just going to get better. So Eamon is largely responsible for that. So thank you, Eamon. Cheers. Awesome. All right, let's see. I may need to run over here and just hit the next button every now and then, so I hope that you bear with me through this talk. And also, today I'm going to ask a few questions, and that's generally what this is about right now, is me just sort of asking questions and something just relating some personal experience and finding out maybe if I can get some advice from you also. So why are we here? We're here at the Roots of American Food, and we are honoring the chef, Jeremiah Tower. And where is chef here? Has he stepped out? May not be here, but he is up here on this screen. And here he is doing something that I think is incredibly important as a chef. And we were asked to speak to something that maybe we learned from Chef Tower, or something that that inspired us. And I was reading through the first few pages of Jeremiah Tower Cooks, thanks to Eamon, who has the book in his signed copy in his library. And in the first few pages, it's a chapter called Delights and Prejudices, which I'm assuming is a nod to James Beard, who wrote a book of the same title, sort of about his experience in the Bay Area, covering things like Jack's Restaurant and his experience eating oysters and kind of this sort of stuff growing up. But the knowledge, the thought of, not all ingredients are equal, I thought was kind of interesting. And this may, as a chef, be, and I'm not meaning like truffles are better than green beans, totally opposite of that, actually. But not all green beans are the same as green beans, right? So taste your ingredients. When you go to a market, put your hand in the bag and eat that green bean, and maybe eat the green bean of the farmer next to it, and you're going to realize maybe one's totally sweeter. Holy smokes, it's different. Make your decisions based on tasting your food, and I think that was an interesting lesson that he, that I hold dear also, and I realized that was really cool. So, ingredients, super important as a chef, and finding the greatest ingredients to work with possible. So thank you, Jeremiah. So, setting that aside, here he is eating, I think, like a coconut or something or a fish in Australia. I was hoping he would be here to sort of let you know what's going on when he was a kid for the first time. So, along the way, you're going to have a few scenic photographs. I want you to know that these are not stock images that I've pulled off the interwebs, but this here is just part of the Hudson River, and it's outside of Columbia County. So, okay. So, move forward. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am originally from North Carolina, but I really started my professional career as a chef when I moved to San Francisco, and I went to culinary school. I worked at a few restaurants. I started at a restaurant called Postrio, and it was there I started seeing ingredients like Meyer lemons, like Buddha hand, chermoya, Like, this stuff doesn't exist in North Carolina. And I went to farmers markets in North Carolina also with my mother, who's a nutritionist and a cultural anthropologist, just super into the markets. We ate like these awesome tamales wrapped in collard greens, but hot sauce on them. You didn't have to unwrap them, you just eat the whole thing. It was amazing. But in San Francisco, I was awoken to these just awesome sort of produce experience and these ingredients I'd never seen before. I left Postrio and I went to work at another restaurant called Rubicon. There, the chef was so passionate about ingredients and the market. And every week he'd take the cooks to the market and we'd hop in his little green BMW and drive to the market, and we'd wait in line for Blue Bottle coffee, and then one person would go off to Mariquita Farms, and then somebody would go to Happy Quail for like their little padrones, and then we go to see the date guy who wouldn't let you touch the dates with his hands or he'd freak out, or like one guy who just grew sprouts. It was like all he did, the sprout farmer. And this was, this chef who's here in the audience today sort of opened my mind even more. It was like, holy smokes, look at these ingredients. They're amazing. And we're tasting the ingredients. And we're not just purchasing these, calling up, I think it was called Greenleaf or something. I don't know if they still exist. But we weren't just getting these ingredients, calling them up and say, oh, send us, your tomatoes and your whatever and your patty pan squash and you're getting these ingredients. And we weren't using those in the restaurant. We were finding the best of what was around. And Stuart really showed me that you had to taste and use the best of what's there. So it really raised my bar. My bar of produce was like here. Now it's like up here. I'm like, holy smokes. I don't know if any of you live or work in California or in San Francisco in the Bay Area, but it seemed to me like every piece of produce was like a gem or a jewel. It was just like outrageous. And that became the standard. That was it. This is just how it was. And this is what we used, and these are the ingredients that we used to cook with. Now, flash forward, 2007, I moved to New York. I always wanted to move to New York. You always heard in San Francisco cooks saying, oh, there's always a great comparison if you're a cook in San Francisco and a cook in you always sort of compare, like, New York cooks, or, they're this way, or San Francisco cooks are this way, or the restaurants in New York are one way because, they don't have great ingredients, so they have to do a lot of stuff to it, and they just make it look cool on the plate, but that's really good out there. But like here, we just have good stuff, so we just grill it and put it on the plate, but that's not really true either. But, I think I was always intrigued. I was like, what is this about? I knew I wanted to take my cooking career to the next level, so what was that about? And when we got there, when I got to New York City, I realized something, I saw something a little different. So, how do you do this? Help. Somebody, please. Okay. Did I unplug it? Yeah, exactly. All right, so I'm going to pose a question to you real quick. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think, I just sort of cheated a little bit. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think San Francisco San Francisco Bay Area produce? Any words? Any thoughts?
I got one. I used to live in Berkeley for a couple of years, and the first thing that comes to mind for me, because it's something I miss dearly, is I used to buy these dates called Bari dates, B-A-R-H-I, and when you have them at room temperature, they're like honey on the interior, very viscous. When you freeze them, the outside sort of like breaks off, and it's like a hard candy on the inside. So I would just freeze a handful, break the outside, and just walk around sucking on them all day. It was so crazy delicious.
Dates, very unique. I've not yet found a date farmer in New York. Anybody else? Idea, what comes to mind? I say, hey, San Francisco Bay Area produce, what comes to mind? Anybody?
Pluots.
Pluots. Chef?
Salad.
Salads. Star Root Farms, that was one that we used to use. Perhaps, maybe not so much. Chef. Abundance. These were things that sort of came to my mind as well. And like I said, everything sort of seemed to be a jewel. All right. There we go. Okay. All right. Now, what comes to mind when you think New York City produce? Chinatown. Okay. What describes the veggies when you think New York City produce? Short season. Root veggies. Kale. I love kale. I'm a big fan of kale. So when I arrived in the city, I came with these sort of preconceived notions of short growing season, not much around, the produce is going to be junk. And I got in and immediately I felt like I was validated at first. And I learned later that I was wrong and that I was naive about it. But we were buying patty pan squash, and where were they coming from? Guatemala. Still, even in the center, the middle of patty pan squash season in New York, if you call up the produce purveyor and say, "Hey, I want patty pan squash," they send you patty pan squash from Guatemala. It's growing down the street, and they bring it to you from Guatemala. I don't know. The corn is coming from Mexico, or the chives are coming from Israel, and these sort of things. I was thinking, what is going on? Like, the standard was here. You know what I mean? What's going on? So I was a little bit horrified, and I was like, you know what? They were all right. New York City's produce is terrible, but it's not true. I was wrong, and I didn't know why. And I later found out that I was naive, but I think there was a couple reasons why I felt that way. And we're going to talk about those. Why did I feel like New York City produce was terrible? That's some New York City produce right there. Yeah. These are long beans from Boda Tree. Why? Why did I feel this way? Why? Tell me why. All right, I get three reasons. These are basic, and I'm sure there's plenty more. But 1, access and availability. 2, education. I was naive. I knew nothing. I still know very little. Culture, and the culture of being in New York City. We don't have time to talk about all of these today, but let's just talk about the first one. We'll start with access and availability. And I'm going to talk, I'm going to talk about some brief numbers. Some of this is based off of a agricultural census in 2007, so some of it's a little bit old, just to throw it out there. Some of it's based off of Farmland.org information in the Farmland Trust, and things may not match up perfectly, but if you have questions, but I'll try to get access and availability. This is a road. This is outside of Chatham, New York, Old Chatham, and just outside of where they raise sheep for Old Chatham Sheep Herding Company. Okay, let's just talk about people, population. Population in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's about 7.7 million people in the Bay Area. That's San Francisco City, that's Alameda, Oakland, Sonoma, Napa, up in, San Mateo, was it Sonora County? It's yes, it's kind of out there. That's the population. Now we talk about New York City and how many people are in New York City. In that region, in that area, almost 22 million people reside in New York City's area. In New York City alone, there's over 8, almost 9 million people. So population alone creates a higher density of people, would create, you'd think, a little bit more competition for the ingredients. So maybe that's why I couldn't get good stuff. This is Eric Smith, by the way. Eric Smith grows heirloom wheat varieties and other grains up in Ithaca, New York. And he says that you can make bread out of his heirloom varieties of wheat that if you have a gluten intolerance that you can eat because the protein strands, he was saying that like, protein strands have been or the wheat's been so manipulated that gluten's like proteins are so long to withstand mechanical agitation or whatever. He says people with gluten intolerances can eat bread made from his grain. I don't know. But pretty passionate, used to be a mathematician, now he grows grains. Okay, cropland acreage. Right, so does anybody know how many acres of land are in California? It's 103 million acres of land in California. All right, 24 million acres of that is farmland in California. And that's all farmland. That's grazing, that's, silage, whatever, like corn, to the whole San Joaquin Valley, all this. And now we go down just to the San Francisco Bay Area, that same area that we talked about, the population. 570,000 acres of that is cropland acreage. So that's growing food, not like Sonoma County is, I don't know, almost, and that's maybe 60% of the farmland area around San Francisco. The other 40% is mainly grazing, and Sonoma County has a lot of that. It's cow country out there, you know what I mean? But there's 570,000 acres of farmers growing food for 7 million people. And obviously it doesn't all stay right there, but these are ideas and questions that I'm asking. So then, the entire New York State, how many acres of land are in New York State? I have to look this up. So about 30 to 31 million acres of land just in the state of New York. That's all land. That's built, not built. About 7.5 million of that is farmland. And then in the entire New York State, about 700,000 acres are cropland, and that's in the entire state of New York. So I think it's a fair comparison because if you go up to the tip of Sonoma County, it's kind of like driving to the Finger Lakes a little bit. And if you're in New York City and you go to Red Jacket Orchards or you at the farmers market, they bring it down from Seneca Falls. So that's about the same hike as if you're going up to the top of Sonoma. So 700,000 acres of cropland, farms growing food for how many people? 22 million. You'd think there'd be some competition for some good stuff. And speaking of Red Jacket, these are some Bing cherries that Red Jacket is growing. And it was just starting to rain outside, and the rain was grabbing the cherries. It's pretty awesome. Number of restaurants. Okay, so we know the population of people. These are people just going, they could be eating at the supermarket, going to the farmer's market, they could be going whatever, eating, they eat out, whatever. Okay, now let's talk about restaurants. Now this is from the Department of Health in both cities. So essentially, these are not just restaurants like Bettany's, but they're the 7-Elevens, they're the school cafeterias, they're anywhere that the health department would inspect. So maybe this isn't, an exact comparison, but we're going to say, hey, this is everything, and in both. So in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's 7,000 restaurants over that get inspected in food establishments that are eating off of 570,000 acres of cropland. And then in New York City, over 24,000 food service establishments that need to be inspected by the health department. They are in the weeds. Can you imagine? How do you organize that? We need to inspect 24,000 people this year? That seems great. And that's a whole nother situation, and we don't have to talk about the health department or food inspection. But 24,000 restaurants for 700,000 acres of cropland. you'd think there'd be some competition. So how do you get the good stuff? This is Eric Smith. He grows hardneck garlic, Rocambole garlic, in Orange County, New York. And he's he and his wife Flavia. Flavia's a poet, and they write poetry, and he grows this garlic, and it's just unreal. If you think you've had great garlic, even if you get like, say you call the produce company and sends you California garlic, this is just, it's like another thing when you buy his Rocambole. Growing season. Chef, is this correct? Can you get tomatoes in June and in November in California? So Love Apple Farms is saying, hey, their favorite new early season variety of tomato is this New Girl or whatever. And it's like a delicious, it's better than the Early Girl. It comes really early in the season. It's just amazing. And you can get it probably in the end of May even. You know what I mean? You're not getting this quality, delicious heirloom tomato in New York in May or in June. It's not happening. And then all the way into like the Black Beauties at the end of November, and some of these late varieties. Also, they're doing some research into these Siberian tomatoes that are even colder, resistance to more cold weather, but they're like an heirloom variety or whatever. They can have fruit up until like December or something if you're in this insulated Sonoma coast, kind of Northern California, maritime meets mountain sort of region where it never gets that cold at night. You can still have tomatoes up until December. It's not happening in New York. Who here lives in New York besides Eamon and I? And when you're at the market, how often are you seeing tomatoes at the market in July? Yes? Yeah, but it's not like it's not like, oh smokes, Tim Starks just dropped the bomb on us. Like, no, it's you know what I mean. There's just like there's a few tomatoes. They're starting to pop up, maybe, and they may not even be that great yet. And then in September, you usually see them falling off, except for maybe Franca. I think Franca has tomatoes sometimes until November, and I don't know if it's her, like, she has a farm buried treasure. It's just where the Catskills are coming down and meeting the beaver kill, and I don't know if it's sort of insulated there just a little bit, but she will have tomatoes almost until November, which is really rare. But growing season, much shorter. So June, July, August, September, October, November, 5 months. July, August, 3 months. So there's 2 months longer of growing season just for tomatoes. You're going to have more tomatoes. It's going to be harder to get the good stuff. These are grapes. These are in Long Island. They are, I can't remember. Maybe, Will, can you pick these grapes out? Do you know what they are? Those are Merlot grapes. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, how do you get the good stuff? This is the question for you as chefs, food professionals. How do you get the good stuff? I have a couple ideas here, and I'm going to go back here. So I want you to tell me. How do I get the good stuff? Relationships. What do you mean?
Getting up early and meeting the people that have the good stuff, fostering a relationship with them.
So that they're more inclined to give you the good stuff.
That's right.
Got it. Chef.
I think it just takes a ton of work. On everyone's behalf, especially in that small growing season.
A ton of work, working hard. How do you get the good stuff? Francis.
I think you have to make your intentions known with the produce too, right? I think a lot of it is like you need to demonstrate what you want. Like how does, I think about what Mark was saying yesterday. How does working at Campus make you be the person you want to be? How does this produce make you be the chef you want to be? And I think you need to sort of communicate that level of passion and that level of intention to the grower.
So having a passion about the produce and building a philosophy around it. How do you get the good stuff? Money. Money. You got to have money. Absolutely. Although there's I know there's a program like I think No Kid Hungry is doing it, where if you take your EBT to the farmer's market, you get double the money. So there's access there, even if you don't have a lot of money. How do you get the good stuff? So, Leti, how do you get the good stuff?
You have a game plan for how to buy the good stuff. So actually building that into your business and devoting resources to it, which is expensive and hard.
Building infrastructure.
Building the menu around it too.
So I said, early bird gets the worm. If I show up to the farmer's market at 10 a.m., Modesto from Gramercy Tavern has taken all of the sugar snap peas, and I will have 0. It happens. I've been there. Kernan Farms in New Jersey just starts coming out with the most beautiful sugar snap peas, and you're like, these are the sweetest things I've ever tasted. I'm going to be here on Wednesday, and there's 0. He'll grab, there must have been 200 pounds. The man took them all. And I feel for the cooks at Gramercy, because I don't know what they did. They must have been super in the weeds that day. You got to get there early. You know what I mean? It's easier if you work in the morning. You showed up to work at 6 in the morning. When I was getting off the train in Union Square and walking up to the restaurant, and when I was the purchaser, I could see Alex Paffenroth unloading his truck at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. And we had such a relationship, you know what I mean, that if he had something cool, he'd let me know. You know what I mean? He would have my order. He'd have it set aside. I'd come pick it up at 8 a.m. You know what I mean? But I could touch base. Be there. They're unloading the truck. Be there. You know what time they show up? Be there. That's a big part of it. If you're not there, you're not going to get it. So be there. Know your grower. Create a relationship. What's the phone number? Email. Farmers are texting. They text all the time. Text your farmer. Yo, what do you got coming in? What's coming in next day? You know what they've got good stuff. Let them know you're looking for it. If you have a relationship with them, they're more likely to set things aside for you. They know what you want. They know what you're looking for. I need butternut squash that has a neck that is exactly 6 centimeters in diameter every time. And he will go through this butternut squash and set aside, 40 of these butternut squash with a 6 centimeter wide diameter neck, because that's what you demand, and you have that relationship. They'll go out of their way to do this for you. Plan ahead. Know what's coming into season. Know what the good stuff is. Know when it's coming around. Plan ahead, plan your menu, be prepared. Grapes in New York, and I'm not talking the wine grapes, but like the Concords, even the little seedless, delicious guys, the Niagaras, they happen, I feel like it's around for like 2 weeks. If you don't know what you're going to do with it, you know what I mean? When it comes around, or if you're not prepared or ready for it, you're probably not going to serve these grapes on your menu. You know what I mean? And so plan ahead. Be consistent. Don't just be there early. But be there all the time. You know what I mean? That's about building relationships. Be the guy that's at the market. You know what I mean? In the morning, in the produce, with your hands on it, talking there. Be there over and over and over again. Be consistent, and you get the good stuff. Be proud of supporting your local agriculture and your local farms, and be proud of the produce that you have and serve at the restaurant, because it's going to make other people want it too. You know what? We have more people going to the market, purchasing from these farmers. You're not going to see the 12 to 13%, 14% farmland loss, in the next whatever years. It's going to make for a viable business. Farmland expands, more produce, more demand will keep us having the good stuff. That's Black Angus. That's the bull. His name is Mr. Wright. Just thought I'd let you know. Black Dirt Farms, Orange County. Bottom of an old lake bed. You see the soil is the color of charcoal. There's good stuff in New York. And if you're ever feeling stressed, just hold a baby goat. And that's it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen, very much. Cheers. It was great to be here. Had a great time. Appreciate it. Thank you. How do you get the good stuff? I have a question for you. Questions? Okay.
Do you think Modesto tells stories about you and Ramsey Town?
No, I wish. I wish. I think, like my, no. He's been going to the market for how long? Where's Ashley Raff? No. Maybe John, the chef John, who used to be the purchaser for Blue Hill, he used to snake me on golden raspberries. And I have to beat John, and we'd have to do some bartering. But no. Questions?
What was your turning point where you realized you had a misconception of New York produce?
When I started being the purchasing manager at EMP, and we decided as a restaurant that we were going to be determined to get the best of what's around and the best of what's here. And you set up a rule for yourself, and then you follow it. You say, I'm going to buy produce from here. That's it, because I believe in it, and because it's the good stuff. And then you follow that rule, and it just opens your eyes. And so no longer were we seeing these patty pan squash from Guatemala. We have patty pan squash from Norwich, New York. So.
We heard the Werps yesterday talk about how they build relationships with chefs who encourage them and inspire and ask outright them to grow specific things. Do you have those kinds of relationships with farmers as well? In addition to seeking out the good stuff, are you also helping develop some good stuff?
Yeah, I think, to a small extent. I remember there was a few years ago when I was asking, Rick Bishop at Mountain Sweet Berry to grow agretti. Like, can we get some agretti? Agretti. What? He's like, what is agretti? It's like, I think I grew that back in 1978 or something. You know what I mean? And and now we see agretti at the market all the time. And it's this great salty Italian marsh green that's awesome in salads and a really fun garnish because it looks like hair, kind of, And and it makes change. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on RSAs, so kind of restaurant-supported agriculture, so partnering up with a farm to grow what you need in order to both sustain them and yourselves?
I mean, I think that's an incredible thing. I have not been a part of one, so I don't know much about it. I do think that, it'd be the right way to go. And as a chef, it makes you probably pretty nimble because, hey, today you might just get, 200 pounds of corn, and that's all you get, or whatever. You know what I mean? And now, well, okay, we're going to cut some corn, and we're going to freeze some corn, and we're going to, make some fresh grits, and we're going to, have corn. We're going to juice the corn and make corn pudding, and then we're going to do a corn agnolotti, and then there's going to be, And I think as a chef, it would make you, from a chef's perspective, it would make you super creative. And I think that sort of relationship is awesome. And I'd be willing, at the restaurant to explore something like that. I think that, also, I would. I think it would be cool. And I think it would be a great opportunity for a farm to, also show the best of what they have, and if they work closely with a chef, develop also their repertoire. So maybe after a few years, you're not just getting just corn. You know what I mean? You're getting all these ingredients because maybe you've talked to them and you've developed a growing program. So I think it's awesome. Questions? Nope. Thank you. Thank you.